Pues buenas tardes de nuevo. Tenemos un súper último ponente, que es el profesor Silvio Danese, de Italia, él está en Milán, al cual esperamos poder escuchar. Silvio, ¿nos escuchas? Y luego me gustaría saludarlo primero, luego veremos, él dará su presentación y atenderá las preguntas. Silvio, ¿cómo estáis?
Todo bien.
Todo bien, todo bien. Está a Roma, vero?
No, ahora estoy en Milán.
Ha ritornato. Silvio,
sí,
veréis
sí.
que... Silvio, yo voy a hacer Mira, te voy a presentar en castellano, en español, porque debéis de saber que el profesor Silvio Danese habla perfecto español, entiende bien español, y el truco está en que él tuvo ocasión de hacer una estancia de Erasmus en Salamanca, y que puedo decir, y tú, Silvio, puedes corroborar, ¿verdad?, que tiene grandes recuerdos de Salamanca. ¿Correcto, Silvio?
Claro, siempre voy a decir que es el mejor periodo de mi vida.
Pues yo voy a muy brevemente presentaros, aunque lo conocéis, todos conocéis a los digestólogos, los aibidólogos, todos conocen a Silvio Danese, pero permitidme que os dé dos pinceladas. Silvio es, sin ningún tipo de duda, la persona que más sabe de enfermedad de Crohn y colitis ulcerosa en el mundo en este momento. Y para mí, que hace 20 años que lo conozco, ha sido un verdadero placer asistir a su ascensión meteórica en todos los aspectos de la enfermedad inflamatoria intestinal. Cuando yo conocí a Silvio hace exactamente 20 años, él era un médico joven con gran inquietud en la fisiopatología de la enfermedad inflamatoria intestinal. Estuvo una temporada larga en Cleveland, en Ohio, en Estados Unidos, en la Case Western Reserve University, con nuestro mentor, el profesor Claudio Fiocchi. Silvio en ese momento hizo un trabajo espectacular en muchos campos, que no puedo mencionarlos todos, pero por ejemplo, en ciencia básica de Crohn y colitis, es una persona clave para definir la contribución de la angiogénesis y luego más tarde de los linfáticos y del retorno linfático a la fisiopatología, en lo que él le explicó muy bien como el in-out, a la fisiopatología de Crohn y colitis ulcerosa. Pues bien, este médico joven brillante que publicó al más alto nivel, con no sé cuántos miles de puntos de impact factor en las mejores revistas básicas, luego tuvo la habilidad de, manteniendo su grupo de investigación con Stefania Vetrano en Milán, de hacer grandes aportaciones a la enfermedad inflamatoria intestinal clínica. Es un excelente clínico, ve muchísimos pacientes, ha hecho mucha endoscopia, es seguramente la persona que en más ensayos clínicos ha estado, y a la hora para las agencias reguladoras, sea la FDA, la EMA, es una persona clave a la hora de evaluar los fármacos que ahora utilizamos de forma convencional en nuestra práctica clínica. Por tanto, mucho más joven que yo, un tío joven que ha sido brillante en el laboratorio, aislando células con cultivos celulares, y brillante también en el trato con el paciente y en aportaciones claves para cómo manejamos en la clínica ahora Crohn y colitis ulcerosa. A nivel personal, y es mi última pincelada, ha sido un placer conocer y seguir a Silvio estos 20 años. Silvio tiene una fantástica esposa que es Silvia, tiene 3 fantásticos hijos que son Alessandro, Amelia y Victoria, y ha sido un placer no solo hacer investigación juntos o compartir vivencias en IBD estos 20 años, sino compartir mucho tiempo fuera del hospital y fuera del IBD y en el contexto de vacaciones o de estar en casa de uno o de otro, y le tengo un cariño enorme a él y a su familia. Pues bien, dicho esto, ¿quién mejor para darnos una pincelada, explicarnos qué hay de nuevo y qué es importante en el año 2022 en enfermedad inflamatoria intestinal? Pues ese es Silvio. Silvio, vamos con tu charla y luego responderemos preguntas. ¿Te parece?
Perfecto, gracias, Miquel. Gracias
Andiamo.
por esta introducción. Dear colleagues, I would like to thank Miquel Sanz for his kind invitation. And in the next few minutes, I will try to give you an overview about the new kids on the block. And I will review all the new mechanism of action of most of the drugs that are going to enter our clinical practice for inflammatory bowel disease. These are my disclosures. So these are many years of success and failures for our patients with inflammatory bowel disease, with many protocols and many trials that have been running. And I will try to look one by one at what is happening about the late development of many clinical trials. And of course, I will focus first on endothelial leukocyte interaction. And it has been clear that after vedolizumab, selectivity is the key for success with many molecules on the pipeline, and also thinking about how we can avoid with gut selectivity bad side effects such as PML. And the story actually is quite interesting because vedolizumab was supposed to be the best candidate. And in fact, this is an example of the non-inferiority study that has been recently published in Lancet Gastro, comparing vedolizumab versus infliximab. As you know, this is a study that has failed the superiority, but is found to be very similar results between vedolizumab and infliximab. And actually, even though we know that the drug is there, it's also true that when it was tested, the capability in TNF naive to induce and maintain remission, unfortunately, the registration trial failed the primary endpoint. And for this reason, unfortunately, vedolizumab will not enter in our clinical practice. It is true that at the moment, the next generation drug are going to be just orals. So we don't have so much monoclonals that are left in this space after vedolizumab. Now let's look at what we are targeting. With vascular endothelial cells, we are targeting the arrival of bad leukocytes to the gut, but after the leukocytes enter the gut, they need also to exit through the lymphatics and through the lymph nodes. And actually, there are molecules that are able to govern the efflux of leukocytes outside from the lymph nodes towards the periphery. And this is mediated with sphingosine-1 phosphate and their receptors. And if there is a gradient, this is favoring the exit of leukocytes, but there are blockers that are small molecules that are able to maintain the leukocytes entrapped inside the lymph nodes, avoiding them to go towards the periphery. And one of these is ozanimod, which is already approved, and etrasimod, which is next generation. And actually, this is the New England paper that has shown that ozanimod is very effective, not only as induction, but also as maintenance therapy for ulcerative colitis. As you see, clinical remission, clinical response, endoscopic improvement, and mucosal healing were all significantly superior when compared to placebo, not only in the induction, but also in the maintenance. And that's why the drug is approved and in some European countries is being also used. Let's look also at etrasimod. Etrasimod, actually, the data have been just presented at the DW. These are the phase 2 showing that the 2 milligram is quite successful for clinical activity and endoscopic improvement. So also etrasimod is a drug that is very likely to be part of our clinical armamentarium in the near future. Now let's look at anti-cytokines after anti-TNF, and this is all the space of the blockers, so interleukin-23. As you see, the after ustekinumab that blocks P40, that is the commonly shared unit of IL-12 and IL-23. Many blockers are coming that are selective for interleukin-23. These are the blockers of P19 and brazikumab, guselkumab, mirikizumab, risankizumab. All of them are inhibited interleukin-23. This is MEDI 2070 that has been published and this is quite effective in Crohn's disease, as you see from the phase 2 trial in patients that are all failing anti-TNF. So as you see in orange, this is significantly superior for as compared to placebo in clinical response, but also in remission. And actually, what is interesting is that now this is moving in phase 3 for both Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. It will take a little bit of time, but there are more drugs that are matured. This is risankizumab registration trial, interleukin-23 blocker. This is in moderate to severe Crohn's disease, either failing a conventional or biological treatment. 2 different doses versus placebo, classical induction and then maintenance. And when you look at the data, you can clearly see that there is a superiority of both doses for all the clinical endpoints and also for endoscopic response. This is at 12 weeks. And also, actually, when you look at all the endoscopic endpoints for the advanced and motivate studies, actually, this is quite impressive because endoscopic remission has been successfully achieved, including ulcer-free endoscopy in the long term. So I would say that this is actually quite interesting because this is giving us the flavor not only of the symptoms improvement, but also on the endoscopy capability of risankizumab in patients with Crohn's disease. Guselkumab is the third one. And when you look at the data of guselkumab, all the different doses here and also ustekinumab as a reference arm are effective when compared to placebo in patients with Crohn's disease at 12 weeks. You see that there is a dramatic drop in CDI, and this is quite successful. And of course, now we have also the maintenance data, and we are seeing the enrollment in phase 3. But I would say that this is when you look at the interim for any endpoint, you see that clearly this pathway is successful, and also guselkumab is showing great efficacy for each dose. Of course, in the phase 3, we will see the dose selection, and then hopefully when we will have this study completed, also this is a drug that will come into our clinic. Let's look at mirikizumab. This is the final one. And you see that also for mirikizumab, great efficacy data. This is the phase 2, but also the phase 3 data have been presented. So this is also another product that will make it not only, just as a reminder, these are all drugs. I showed you some of the data, but they are all enrolling in Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. Now let's switch gear. Let's go in an area in which tofacitinib is the first JAK inhibitor, but as you see, this area is quite dense with upadacitinib and also filgotinib that are already here. Let's look at the data. And I want to show you first filgotinib. As you know, this is already approved for the selection studies in ulcerative colitis. Hopefully, we'll see very soon also data for Crohn's disease. But the 200 doses is very effective, and that's the dose that is approved, both in biologic naive and in biologic experienced patients, not only in the short term, but also, of course, in the maintenance, as you see here. This is actually a JAK1 selective, and this is bringing more safety to patients with inflammatory bowel disease. Trial with phase 3 is completed, I think, or is about to be completed, and very soon we will see the data release. Upadacitinib, induction successful data in ulcerative colitis in the UAchieve study. These are 2 parallel studies as induction at 8 weeks. You see great efficacy over placebo and remission, response, and all the key ranked secondary endpoints, endoscopic improvement, remission, and histoendoscopic mucosal improvement. This is the first study. The second parallel study, identical and superimposable results with great delta in the UAccomplish study. And also in this case, you see actually something that is very remarkable, the fast speed of onset of this drug. And it's not only a matter of induction, but also maintenance. You see that half of the patients at both doses of 15 and 30 are superior as compared to placebo in maintaining clinical remission. And it's not only a matter of clinical remission, because all the different endpoints, including the endoscopic improvement, maintenance of endoscopic improvement, endoscopic remission, and histoendoscopic mucosal improvement are here maintained. So this is a drug that actually, as you know, it has been approved already in US and also positive opinion with CHMP. And actually the data in Crohn's disease have been presented at the DDW with a press release. And these are the phase 2, but also in phase 3, the data are quite successful, not only for induction, but also for maintenance. So these are drugs that will come in our clinical practice. Next JAK generation, this is from Pfizer, are ritlecitinib and brepocitinib. These are an umbrella study recently performed. We will see hopefully the full paper presented. But when you look at the data, both are quite successful in this proof of concept study, phase 2, in patients with moderate to severe active ulcerative colitis for remission, endoscopic improvement. And this is, of course, only 8 weeks, but it's quite remarkable, the efficacy results that we've been seeing in our patients. So now let's move in the next generation drug. And just to give you an overview, I want to give a sense of what is happening, but the pipeline is very dense. So I'm sure that many other drugs I didn't touch here are still in phase 2, in phase 1b, but most of these will progress. And I think that the future is very bright for our patients with inflammatory bowel disease. And with this, I thank you for your attention, and I will be very happy to take questions. Thank you very much.
Silvio, thank you very much indeed. Y me voy a pasar al castellano de nuevo porque cuando pienso en Silvio me acuerdo que él entiende perfecto el español. Silvio, te decía, como siempre, y te he oído en los últimos 20 años un montón de charlas, brillante, en poco tiempo nos diste un montón de datos y sobre todo, más que datos, nos diste opiniones sobre qué te parecían cada uno de los resultados, y eso es muy importante, no solo el número, sino poner en perspectiva, poner en contexto lo que tenemos y lo que vendrá. Hay unas cuantas preguntas para ti. La primera nos llega desde Chile. Tenemos muy buenos amigos en Chile y allí te preguntan por los anti-JAK. Claro, tuvimos primero tofacitinib con una serie de problemas en su perfil de seguridad, trombosis, etcétera, warning, y luego tenemos otros más específicos. ¿Qué valor, nos preguntan los amigos chilenos, qué valor le das tú a esa especificidad? ¿Es realmente esa la clave para dar con el mejor, y hay varios ahí que van a llegar, para dar con un excelente anti-JAK quinasa?
Creo que la selectividad de los JAK es válida por filgotinib, but for upadacitinib, I have to answer in English.
Sí, please feel free. Everybody will understand you in English.
Yeah, is not really that selective, and at the moment, both FDA is already very clear for JAK's positioning after TNF, but EMA it's reassessing all the JAKs and their positioning depending on the particularly in relation to the safety profile of the thromboembolism and pulmonary embolism. So we need to wait for the final data.
Absolutely. And Filgo, UPA, which one do you believe is, quote in quotes, more specific, if we can make this statement? Is one that upfront might be more specific?
It's only filgotinib, because even upadacitinib at the moment is changing their description in not anymore the JAK1 selective, but good. They describe themselves as JAK inhibitors.
So we will likely to have and use Filgo in the near future. We have more questions from the audience, and this comes from Barcelona, so close here. And they tell us that, okay, we see results, we see delta as compared to placebo. We see some might look more promising than others, but there's a reality, at least in Spain, and I am sure in Italy and most likely everywhere, which is costs. And costs, considering the low price of anti-TNF biosimilars, these, at least in our area, are used for sure and almost always first-line therapy. Do you think this is the best way to go? We have to consider cost in our decisions. So we should, or in some occasions, our colleague from Barcelona says, do you think that in some subset of patients, maybe higher risk of side effects, etc., or more fragile patients should be put on Vedo, ustekinumab before anti-TNF? Even being more costly.
Yeah, I would say that at the moment, if you have no specific reason to select one mechanism of action over another one, that means patient profile, then all the drugs are performing at the same way. In fact, at the end, costs are going to make a big difference. But unfortunately, of course, in clinical practice is much more different because we have patients that may have so many comorbidities that you would like to use Vedo first or Ustek first. And this is going to make really influencing our clinical choices.
Perfect. We continue with questions from the audience, and this one comes from Colombia, also very good friends from Medellín. And I will write in what they wrote in Spanish. Doctor Danese, si tuviera que apostar su dinero, ¿a cuál cree de los fármacos nuevos que tiene mejor prospect, mejor opciones de jugar un papel relevante más allá de los conocidos anti-TNF, Vedo y Uste?
All the IL-23 inhibitors. They are very, very effective and very safe. So I think these are going to be used heavily in our clinical practice.
And now a question from myself, Silvio. What do you think efficacy is clear? In spite we cannot compare different figures from different studies. The ideal is the varsity situation when we see face-to-face two of the candidates. Are you aware of many other face-to-face clinical trials? Because I'm sure you also love those designs in which in a certain patients, Crohn, colitis, whatsoever, you can not compare with placebo, but compare one against the other. So varsity was a great advance. You are aware of everything going on. Do you think there are many others? Can you expect other comparisons, face-to-face, drug-to-drug?
Yes, for instance, ustekinumab versus risankizumab, or some other, all the IL-23 are comparing themselves with TNF. Also in the phase 3, guselkumab versus Ustek as a reference arm. So I think that is becoming more and more relevant because of the payers and because of the positioning.
Good. And finally, and for safety, not because efficacy, again, we can see the figures and we can make a guess. You mentioned anti-IL-23 as a very good option. I fully agree. We are at present involved in different trials with mirikizumab, etc. But to what degree we have to take into account safety? I mean, it's only an issue of percentages, how efficacious a medication is, or will you position first or later patients, drugs according to safety? For example, would be a good idea to induce remission with a quick of action medication, very potent, very efficacious, and then try to maintain with the others that, quote in quotes, seem to be safer?
Yeah, that could be a strategy. And in fact, for instance, in the Vega study, this is what is happening, trying to combine or have a strong induction and then maintain with something else. But of course, we need to see clinical studies like this. In the past, we have had cyclosporine and Vedo, and then Vedo maintenance. So the options are endless. We just need the supportive evidence to adopt this strategy.
Perfect, perfect. Silvio, has been a real pleasure. Nos vemos, espero, pronto, no en ECO, DW or UGW, sino espero que Tuscany o Barcelona has to be soon next, el próximo punto de encuentro. Por tanto, un abrazo a Silvia, a los chicos, y nos vemos muy, muy pronto, espero, ya digo, o allí o aquí en Barcelona.
Muchas gracias.
Venga, buenas noches, Silvio, un abrazo.
Buenas noches, gracias.